Hi everyone! Do you ever find yourself spending hours obsessing over every little detail of a project or task, only to end up feeling like you could have done it better? Or maybe you feel like you can never quite live up to your own impossibly high standards, no matter how hard you try. If you can relate, you might be struggling with perfectionism. And if so, you're not alone. Many people deal with perfectionism and fall victim to this have to be perfect mindset, which can be incredibly damaging to your mental health and well-being. But the good news is there are ways to cope with perfectionism and to start living a happier, more balanced life. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about practical tips and techniques that you can use to overcome perfectionism and to start embracing your imperfections. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. So with those things out of the way, let's start talking about escaping perfectionism. Now, this is a continuation of our mini-series on perfectionism, and I've done a couple of other videos about the different types of perfectionism and how perfectionism can negatively impact your life. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to check out those videos as well. So, if you recognize that you struggle with perfectionism, what can you do about it? What can you do to cope and manage perfectionism? Well, the first thing to do is to set realistic expectations for yourself. One of the biggest traps of perfectionism is setting impossibly high standards for yourself, or setting really high but unattainable goals. You see this in students who set the goal of getting straight A's in all of their classes, even though that can be extremely challenging or potentially unlikely. Or if you're a YouTuber, you might set the goal of blowing up your channel and getting 1 million subscribers within the next year, when realistically, that might take years to do if it's even possible. So instead of setting these impossibly high standards, the idea is to break down your larger goals into smaller, more manageable tasks. If your goal is to get straight A's in all of your courses, set the smaller goal of getting an A on your next quiz or on your next paper. If your goal is to blow up your YouTube channel, set a smaller goal of making 1 video a week for the next 2 months. These are far more realistic and doable goals that you're more likely to actually get done. It's also important to set deadlines for yourself that are challenging but achievable. If you have a paper that's due in a couple of weeks, set the goal of having to have it finished a few days before the deadline so you have a little bit of time to review and edit the paper. This gives you some wiggle room in case things don't go as planned. Another important aspect of setting realistic expectations and goals is to make sure that your goals are specific and measurable so you can evaluate whether or not you're actually making progress towards them. And what this can do is help you stay on track and see how far you've actually come. If your goal is to get into better shape, set a measurable goal like running a certain distance or lifting a certain weight. Then you can track your progress and celebrate each milestone along the way that you reach. And as you're going through this process of setting realistic expectations for yourself, it's important to recognize when you're putting too much pressure on yourself and adjust your expectations and your goals accordingly. Take it one step at a time and be encouraging to yourself along the way, similar to how you might react to your best friend in that situation. So for example, if you're feeling overwhelmed with a project that you're working on for work, take a break from it and do something that you enjoy rather than just bearing down and feeling like you just have to power through this. Another way to cope with perfectionism is to, as challenging as it sounds, embrace imperfection. Now I know that might sound weird and counterintuitive, but it's important to remember that no one is perfect. And our mistakes and imperfections are what make us human. And one way to embrace imperfection is to view mistakes as opportunities for growth and learning. Instead of beating yourself up over a mistake, think about ways you can learn from it and use it as a chance to improve and to grow. For example, if you make a mistake at work, use it as an opportunity to review and break down what actually took place. By going through this review and debriefing process, you can figure out where things broke down and avoid making the same type of mistake in the future. Another way to embrace imperfection is to remind yourself of your strengths and accomplishments. One of the problems with perfectionism is that we tend to view ourselves in very black and white ways. If I'm not perfect, then I'm a complete failure. But that's not the case. You can still be capable and successful, even though not everything you do is perfect. Think about past successes and recognize that you achieved those successes through hard work and perseverance, not through perfection. Rather than focusing solely on what went wrong or mistakes that you've made, consider those mistakes in the context of everything you've done and the successes and all of the successes that you've achieved. One of the most common ways I see this is in students with incredibly high standards for themselves. They may get 49 out of 50 on a test and beat themselves up over that one question that they got wrong. So what I do is encourage them to think about the mistake that they made on that one question, but to also consider it in the context of the other 49 questions that they got right. And one of the ways you could develop this more balanced view of mistakes and setbacks is to surround yourself with people who accept you for who you are, mistakes and all. This means building relationships with people who are supporting and encouraging rather than people who judge or criticize you. Sometimes perfectionism is a result of critical and unrealistic feedback we get from other people who may be punishing and harsh whenever we make mistakes. So it's important to seek out friends, family members, or mentors who you can talk to about your struggles with perfectionism and who can help you see the bigger picture. Related to this, it's important to practice self-compassion as a way of combating perfectionism. And what I mean by self-compassion is treating yourself with the same level of kindness, understanding, and empathy that you would offer to a good friend who's struggling or a good friend who made a mistake. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be imagining a good friend, but just any other person. It's remarkable how harsh and critical we can be with ourselves, but we would never think or talk that way to someone else. So instead of engaging in harsh self-criticism or negative self-talk, think about ways of offering yourself that encouragement and support. One practical way to practice self-compassion is to start by acknowledging your emotions and your feelings. We tend not to be very good at this, and oftentimes we're not even aware of what we're feeling. For example, if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a moment to recognize that you're feeling overwhelmed and to acknowledge the feeling. You might say to yourself something like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now, and that makes a lot of sense because I'm trying to do 15 things all at once. Most people would feel overwhelmed if they were in this situation right now. Another way to practice self-compassion is to take care of yourself physically and emotionally. I talk a lot about having a sustainable lifestyle and making sure that you're putting fuel in your gas tank so that you don't burn out. This means things like getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, engaging in regular exercise, and doing things for fun. It means taking breaks when you need some and allowing yourself time to relax and do things that bring you joy, like reading a book, going for a walk, or spending time with friends and family. Not every moment of your life needs to be productive or having to achieve something. which is what I often see in people with perfectionism. So self-compassion means allowing yourself some time to do things for you and not always having to engage in instrumental goals or activities, otherwise you're not achieving your best. And inevitably, you're going to make a mistake or fall short of your expectations. Welcome to the club, we all do. I've previously done a video on this in which I talked about coaching style and how we tend to be extremely harsh and critical coaches with ourselves. We have this mistaken belief that the more critical and demanding of ourselves that we are, that's the path to us improving and being more successful in what we do. When in reality, all this really does is demotivate a person and makes it more difficult to succeed. If you want to check out that video, I'll put a link to it above. Now, another important tool in managing perfectionism is to challenge negative thoughts that fuel and drive our perfectionism. So the first thing you need to do is to recognize and acknowledge when you're engaging in negative self-talk that might be fueling perfectionism. Write down some of these thoughts or say them out loud to yourself so that you're explicit in terms of what these thoughts actually are. For example, you might catch yourself saying, "I'm such a failure. I can never get anything right." And once you've identified that negative thought, the key is to now examine it, evaluate the thought, and challenge the negative thought. Ask yourself, is this thought accurate or helpful? Are there other perspectives or other evidence that contradicts this negative thought? So for example, if you catch yourself thinking the thought, "I'm such a failure," ask yourself, is that really true? Is it true that you have never succeeded at anything in your life and that you have always and forever been a failure? Can you think of any accomplishments or any achievements that you've ever had? And if so, that contradicts this negative thought and demonstrates that you're not actually a failure. Related to this, another way to challenge negative self-talk is to replace it with a more realistic thought. Now, the key thing is, this isn't the power of positive thinking. This is the power of realistic thinking. So, for example, if you're thinking, "I can never get anything right," try to come up with a more realistic thought, such as, "Yeah, sometimes I make mistakes, but I also have a lot of strengths and accomplishments." So you see, this isn't entirely positive thinking. I'm acknowledging that I make mistakes, but I'm also acknowledging that I succeed sometimes and I accomplish things as well. It's a much more balanced and realistic way of thinking. Challenging negative self-talk, it takes practice and it takes patience, in large part because what I'm talking about here is thinking about your thinking, which is something we typically aren't very good at. And this is a tool called cognitive therapy. And I've done a number of videos on identifying and challenging negative thinking patterns. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I'd encourage you to check out those videos. And the last tool I want to talk about in terms of coping with perfectionism is to focus on your progress, not perfection. I talked earlier about the importance of setting realistic goals and working towards those goals. As you achieve your goals, it's important to celebrate the small successes and milestones along the way. If your goal is to run a marathon, the idea isn't to just celebrate once you cross that finish line, but to celebrate the various steps that get you to that finish line. Celebrate each time you increase your distance or improve your time or run a particular pace. So while it's important to stay focused on the long-term goals, the idea is to enjoy the journey and the progress that you're making. Progress takes time. These big goals and achievements, they aren't accomplished in one day. And so it really is about recognizing the process that you're going through and continuing to stay motivated because you're seeing the small successes rather than just the setbacks or how far you still need to go. By focusing on your progress, your emphasis is on your own personal growth and development. You're setting your standards and measuring progress against your own goals. Avoid comparing yourself to other people, as this often leads to feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. It's really common in perfectionism to set our standards against the accomplishment of other people, and usually other people who are hyper successful. And if those are the standards that you're setting for yourself, you're invariably going to fail to achieve those standards. And then you're going to beat yourself up and get down on yourself. So it's key to set your own standards and measure your progress against yourself, not other people. Look, perfectionism is a mindset, an unhealthy, unrealistic, and destructive mindset. So the key is to develop more accurate, realistic expectations of yourself that allow for you to embrace the possibility of mistakes and failures, because that's one of the things that makes us human and one of the key ways in which we grow. If you want to learn more about effective ways of challenging your mindset, I'd encourage you to check out this video. And so that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.